Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing another quick practice. So we're going to get into, might as well work our way around different features of the face since like last time I did lips. So let's just jump right in and get to other parts of the face. Yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge to do them by themselves, but it's kind of part of the exercise. It's not to get too distracted by the rest of the face and work on the specific elements that you may not focus on all the time. So for this one, I've done this one before in longer videos, but I might as well just keep them going in nice quick versions. So tool, just single tool. I really like this. This one I polished it a little bit more with some 400 grit sandpaper just to make it a little sharper and smoother. But yeah, you really only need one tool like this for most of the stuff, honestly. So what I'm going to do is just make a little pill shape and flat on one side just because I'm holding on to it. And let's just see what we can do here. So I'm just going to do an eye. It's really hard to do an eye without some of the surrounding area. You kind of need the brow ridge and the fold if you're doing that, and the puffiness of the eye, which changes of course, and then this bag part underneath. So all of those elements, there's a couple different ways to approach this. I'm just going to show a few options. The one, of course, is just to press it out of what you have. So you can start even with a finger, depending on the size. So again, I'm going to do the larger scale first. Your fingernail, depending on the shape of your fingernail, could be a good shape for it. It's not necessarily too this is just a drawing thing as well. That's not really an eye shape. So if you want to get a realistic eye shape, you can bring the inside corner. So I'm assuming the nose is here. If you bring the inside corner down, usually a little bit, and maybe start a little flatter from the inside corner, and then obviously changing it. Eyes can be all kinds of different shapes, but I'm just sort of doing a generic one right now. But that can help. So if you're doing the simplified lines, you can even have like a straight line there, curve, corner can come up a little bit and out, and then straight lines like that. So to get the iris and the eyelids, that's again always a trick here and there. There's lots of different ways to do it. One way is to, of course, press it out of what you have again. So I'm going to say, if you're going to do the brow ridge and epicanthic fold, you can do that. And then depending on how open you want the eyelids, you can even press, if you have a half moon or whatever you want to call that, wedge shape, flat on one side, round on the other. So I'm taking the flat side. I'm just sort of using it to help create that eye shape. So I can press an eyelid right out of it like that as well, just to hint at it at first, but then, depending on how you fold it into the corners, you can refine it quite a bit with just a little bit of pressing like that. The biggest problem when you do that, though, is you're pushing further and further in on the eyeball itself, which can be annoying. So there's a couple ways to, of course, get around that. So again, with this bottom part, just a little bit of pressing. You can do the same kind of thing at the bottom eyelid, and see if I press too hard, too fast, I just pull it away. But you can do a little back and forth and get your indent there. And then how wide you're doing it makes a big difference. So right now this is a very wide eye. So if you want to change it, it's a little easier right now because it's just soft clay, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to tighten that up. So a couple of different ways to do the iris, of course. I can do even a little pinch at the corner if you want to really get that in really quickly. Again, this is going to be a super quick video, so I'm trying to watch my time and just do 10 minutes like this as many days in a row as I can. We'll see what happens. And So for the iris itself, it can be done again with one tool. Normally I would probably switch to the ball tool for this, but because you're going to be displacing some clay, depending on what kind of iris shadow you want to cut. Now, a classic way of doing it is to make the pupil a hole, and the reason why you do that is it lets the shadow cut in darker, and it allows you to just see the eye much more clearly from afar even, and a sculpture. And a lot of times they'll do this thing where they leave a little wedge shape in the middle, and that's like a hint at a glint in the eye. As you can see, it cuts a little light through the shadow there. And then all you really need to do after that is outline the iris. Now where you finish the pupil, of course you don't want to have a circle right in the middle. You want to end it, top eyelid's always covering a little bit of your iris. Whether or not it covers all the pupil, it depends on how dilated your pupils are. You can make somebody look a little more friendly by purposefully dilating those eyes a bit. Just look at, any anime for an example, and you see when they get serious, they even shrink the eyes to ridiculous amounts. But anyway, just going around it now. So once you've outlined the iris, you can take the pupil and of course you can exaggerate the size. Just try out different sizes and watch what happens. But you really only need a little bit of a hint at the iris, and this can work at smaller sizes too, of course, depending on how big you want those eyes to look. I might be going on a little bit on the big side here just to show as an example, but the fun thing about just doing a quick exercise is you could try it out, see what it works. Tuck in that corner. Try not to mess with the eyelid shape. And how much you put on for an eyelash, I can show you that in a second too. Usually I add a piece for that. You can also add the eyelids later just by taking a piece, but you can see really quickly you can get a pretty detailed looking eye without much fine tuning. And of course you can take a tool and fine tune that iris. Now see, I'm not really shaping it like a real eyeball. Normally the iris ducks in, and the front of your eyelid where the contact lens would be is the part that cones outward. But you see the sculpted version of it, of course, is a little different. You take some liberties and you cheat so that when you turn it, you get a nice shadow from a lot of angles. It's just one particular technique. It's not necessarily the right or wrong. And you can even make that little wedge. You can change where you put that little wedge inside the eye. It doesn't have to be just a single point. It can be a little bit of like a V shape. You can even take this a little further and put marks for the iris. I don't usually go that in depth in the clay version because it's not really necessary detail, and it's much easier just to paint. If you really want to do that, you can get a little one hair brush and paint some nice speckles and different lines in the iris. Yeah, and then if you want to add a little eyelash, of course you can take a piece and just add a little wedge or a little flat piece. About 9 minutes. And sometimes you don't even need it to go the whole way. Another common mistake, or just thing that's not observed, is that you don't need the eyelash to start all the way on the inside of the eye, especially for a cartoonized version of it. So usually I'll start with a little piece like that for that size eye, and if you want it to go past the eye a little bit, that's cool too, but I'm sticking it down. I'll start, maybe where the iris starts, not across the whole eye. And that's just a good little trick. You can do that with drawings too, of course. Just see how it was useful to have that ahead of time and not worry about pressing that in later. Then you can do quite a bit with that, of course. Take a little a little curl to the end, depending on how much Winehouse you want to put on the end of that. Totally up to you. I'm not sure what the proper term for that exaggerated eyelash. You can also paint that, but you can see that pretty quickly you can get an interesting shape going. And now it's a little bit more like early CG eyelash. You could, of course, press into that. But again, making every little hair is probably the last thing you want to do for any sculpture. So hinting at the shapes, cutting shadows, that's the kind of thing you want to think about and try to figure out little tricks like that for. But see, even just cutting a little bit into the edge of it here, so just going against my nail. And we're past 10 minutes. All right, I'm gonna wrap that up. But see, I just cutting a little bit into the edge of it, feathering it out a little bit. You can do what you need to do to make that look a little irregular. And there you go, fancy eyelash. So that's it for this lesson. I'm gonna keep these short. Want to have a lot of variety for people who like to learn different ways. Of course, you can always watch the long ones, but they're really meant to just be there as reference and let people work along, and also for me to motivate myself to get things done. So there you go. And smush. Don't be attached. Practice. It's always good practice.